Hi, I'm Tim. Welcome to our channel and thanks for logging on. Today we're discussing the Rolex Cellini Dual reference 5525. You can see this dual time Rolex Cellini dress chronometer in Rolex Everose rose gold and purchase it on our website. Subscribe to our YouTube channel if you enjoy these videos, and please click on the card in the upper right hand corner of the screen at any time during this video to see our full sales listing for this watch with additional accessories included in the sale, high resolution images for your desktop, and naturally complete pricing details for this Rolex Cellini Dual with 2 time zones. So the watch on my wrist looks completely natural. It looks exactly as you'd imagine a traditional, beautifully proportioned and beautifully finished haute de gamme dress watch to appear. But whereas Rolex's sports models like the Explorer 2, the GMT Master, the Submariner, and the Daytona have been around for decades and begin each redesign with a running start, this model, with us for less than half a decade, feels as though it's been around forever, despite the fact that Rolex started essentially with a clean sheet when it began redesigning these watches in the early 2010s. So how does a watch that's relatively new feel as though it's been around since the heyday of the mid-century dress watch? Well, it's all down to proportions and details. Proportions also feed the fit, and fit comes first. So on my 16 centimeter circumference wrist, you can see that the watch is a 39 millimeter round case. Now this is a Cellini, so there are no crown guards, but we're omitting the crown when measuring the watch from 9 to 3. In terms of thickness, it's fairly slim, though not excessively so. It's about the same thickness as a Submariner, oddly. 12.5 millimeters, but with a generously sloped and double-stepped bezel. It will fit underneath any dress cuff or tight sleeve, I guarantee you. Now across the wrist, the watch has a nice compact proportion as it's delightfully manageable 45.3, such that I believe you could easily wear this watch on a wrist as small as 13.5 centimeters in circumference with security and a handsome proportion. Now, because this is one of the few modern Rolex watches that opens this kind of door and gives you this kind of option, I will tell you that it has a lug spacing of 20 millimeters, so if you want to easily transfer this watch to an aftermarket or Rolex OEM strap to change the look, 20 millimeters is your measurement, and all you have to do is transfer that pin buckle. Rolex even gave you a pin tool port on the flank to make that easy. Now you'll see that the strap has semi-curved spring bars to close the gap to the flank of the case, and indeed when I hold it flush to the camera, you can see how the strap allows almost no daylight to be seen between case flank and strap end. So that's a little bit of a Houdini trick by Rolex, but I appreciate the integration it produces. Now the strap is completely unbolstered. It's very flat in profile. It's a gloss, medium rectangular scale, black alligator leather with a monotone stitch and folded edges. You can see, of course, OEM Rolex strap and a supple calfskin on the bottom, comfortable against the skin, paired with a simple but nicely executed pin buckle. It has a grace and a minimalist sort of class to it that makes it feel like it has a sense of occasion all about itself, despite being far smaller and far lighter and far less imposing than the Rolex Oyster clasps we've come to know. This one has a grace to it that, quite frankly, the sports watches lack. The case is also graceful and handsome. You can see that it's more rounded. It's a little bit more fluid in its form than you'll see even from some of the more nuanced Oyster cases from the Yachtmaster and the Daytona families, although this watch is aesthetically probably closest to them if you had to draw a parallel to a Rolex sports watch equivalent. And in that sense, it has no super case lug profile. They're beautifully tapered and rounded. The case has a nice little tumble home rounded profile, almost like a little pot or a vessel from the side. The lugs are perfectly integrated. There's a sense of almost a flame surfacing in the way the light plays against the case flank, and it's beautifully executed. There's not a lot going on here, but what's there is superb. The bezel is minimalist. You can see it has a coined edge, and then it has a little bit of a domed gadron that runs the circumference of the dial and abuts the flank of the sapphire. The sapphire is, as far as I can tell, very shallow in its domed profile. It's not completely flat, but the effort to create an undistorted dial means that the sapphire is minimized. It's almost in the same plane as the bezel. So the dial takes pride of place, and once again, when I hold it flush to the camera, you can see the dial is emphasized. What looks like rose gold is rose gold, so hands, 5-point Rolex coronet crown, and the split indices for the hours are all 18 karat Everose gold. I should mention Everose because we're not quite done with the case and dial. That material is created by Rolex in its own foundry. It has its own laboratories. It creates creates its own alloys, and then it creates and it finishes its own cases. Now, this is a red gold alloy, so far more intense than pink or rose. It also has a higher percentage of platinum, and that helps to prevent the oxidation of the copper, which prevents the rose from turning to yellow over time. So it'll retain its intensity, hence the name Everose. Now, they're gorgeous hands at center. They are actually alpha hands, which I applaud. More elegant than the heavier triangular Dauphines. They're also of high polish, but they're faceted down the center, and you can see that faceting come into play as I tilt the dial to make them a little bit more visible. Now, if you look closely, you'll see there's a little bit of a channel that splits the individual hour indices, and then inboard within the recess of that channel, you can see small Arabic numerals that count off the seconds and the minutes radially. There is a second time zone at 6 o'clock with a very small AM/PM indicator, and I'm going to show you how the watch works. It's a screw-down crown, 50 meters water resistant, but when you pull the crown to its intermediate position, you can move the, well, you can wind it. If you pull it to its intermediate position, you can then set the time independently at center, even as your reference time remains the same. And you'll note that the watch continues to tick, so you don't interrupt the chronometric precision of the watch even as you jump time zones forward or backwards, east or west. Now, one feature that I do want to bring to light is that although this is a 12-hour scale, that little aperture with the moon is actually a mobile indicator that will transition between day and night, giving you light and dark. You can see there's a little sun on a white base before transitioning back to night and the moon. So not just effective at giving you AM/PM distinction for your reference time, but also handsome, charming, and romantic. And you'll note that the watch does feature hacking or stop seconds when you pull the crown to extremity. Now, there's not much to see beneath the high polished case back, aside from the fact that it is nicely finished. Screwed in with a screw down crown, I would bet this watch is a stiff and robust 5 ATM water resistance. I would not be shocked if it's effectively somewhat more, but effectively 50 meters. I'm not going to promise any more than that. What I am going to promise is that the caliber 3180 is a COSC Swiss chronometer that has then been recased and tested to Rolex's superior superlative chronometer standard. So you have COSC on the bare movement, and then on the fully cased up watch, a test to ensure that the movement makes no worse than -2 + 2 seconds of deviation per 24 hours. Now, it also features a free sprung balance, which is incredibly robust against shock, and an overcoil hairspring, which gives the watch concentric beating of the hairspring in any position, any orientation with respect to gravity. It is an automatic winding movement, of course, 48 hours power reserve, and since this watch does have a little bit of a vintage sensibility about it, and you may be inclined to wind it for the sheer romance of the experience, yes, it is a very satisfying wind when you do wind it manually. You can also see, as I turn the watch off axis, it's a bit difficult to capture in the light of the light box, there is a sun ray embossed guilloche pattern about the dial, so you can see it actually has a very distinct and deep striation splaying out from the cannon pinion. Difficult to see flush to the camera, but again, know it's there. This is a watch that rewards Rolex for sweating the details because it feels natural, it feels timeless, it's going to look as good in 20 years as it does today. So even though it is a new design, it feels as though it's been with us forever. Mechanically tough like a sports watch and accurate like a Rolex on the inside, handsome, elegant, and versatile on the outside. You can see and you can purchase this Cellini Dual on our website.